The Big Ten and the SEC find strength in unity, what that might mean for the new 12-team playoff format, and new Washington head coach Jedd Fisch, erstwhile at Arizona. This is the College GameDay Podcast for National Signing Day, Wednesday, February 7th, a day that Pete Thamel doesn't really carry the same juice that it once did, I would say.
Sadly, flips. It used to be so filled with drama. It was like the perfect little college football chestnut present right before the Super Bowl. It was just it used to just be so well situated here. It used to be so fun. And now sad trombones, it barely exists.
Maybe they'll bring it back once the entire structure of the sport is recalibrated and reimagined. And one guy
every day is signing day, Rece. That's the problem.
Well, that's exactly it. And a guy that is in the middle of that right now is new Washington head coach Jedd Fisch. I'm sure you know about Jedd's background. 3 years at Arizona, he took the Wildcats from 1-11 in his first season to 10-3 this past season. Alamo Bowl win. And once Kalen DeBoer went to Alabama, Fisch was quickly hired as the head coach at Washington. Extensive NFL and college assistant experience, worked for Bill Belichick, Jim Harbaugh, Steve Spurrier, among others. Standout tennis player growing up who decided he wanted to be a football coach. And it seems that this decision has worked out quite well. And we're pleased to be joined now by the new head coach of the Huskies, Jedd Fisch. So, Jedd, after turning around Arizona as quickly as you did, what was the most attractive thing? What was the most compelling thing that drew you to make the move to Washington?
Yeah, well, it was hard. I mean, it was you feel so committed to the kids and the relationships you have with them, and you want to make it just you want to just see it all the way through every year, and then you realize that there's this opportunity to enter the Big Ten, go play for a team that just competed in the national championship, go be at a place where football is the priority, go to a place where football becomes a national brand with unlimited resources, with the amount of people in Seattle, the amount of love for Husky football. And we just started thinking about what's the best for long-term sustained success. And it felt like Washington had that opportunity.
Jedd, it's interesting you mentioned the Big Ten pretty early in that answer. We're sort of at an interesting inflection point in college athletics right now. We're writing this week about the SEC and Big Ten's new advisory group, which appears to be like an alignment moving forward. How much of sort of getting to the better financial side of the river, how much did that factor in? There's myriad things to factor into these decisions, right? But how much did getting to that other side factor in when you made this decision?
Yeah, well, I mean, winning is expensive. And that's just the bottom line and how it works when you're competing in a situation where you want to be able to play the very best every single week. You get to play Oregon, you get to play USC, you get to play Michigan, you get to play Ohio State, you get to play Penn State. And when you start looking at that, we go to Iowa. I mean, when you start looking at the games that we have, let alone, the rivalry games, that you start saying to yourself, this feels like the NFL. This feels like this opportunity that every week we're going to be in a battle, that we have to be at our top. They're going to have to be at their top. And then when you start saying, all right, well, how do we have the best nutrition? How do we make sure that our guys are equipped in the safest, best way? How do we make sure that recruiting wise, we can compete with anybody? And how do we make sure that assistant coach comp, we don't have to have new coaches every year? So when you start looking at all those things, the Big Ten and the SEC is what provides that. And this is an opportunity out west. We got the number 2 academic institution here. And then on top of it all, the historical data would tell you that when you put 72,000, 75,000 here at Husky Stadium, you got a chance to win a lot of games.
You've been pretty straightforward about the power of those two conferences. You've got extensive experience in the NFL. What do you see as the direction in college football? Is this going to morph into whoever is aligned with these two conferences, their players, and the other ones are also Rans or belong in a different division, or whatever? What's best for the sport in your judgment?
Yeah, I don't know how it's all going to play out. I just know, I look at a schedule, and if you're a college football junkie or you're someone that loves ball, You're going to start looking at where are the games that matter the most? Where are the games that are going to be on television? Who are you going to click into? If you're an NFL scout, who are you going to watch? Are you going to watch the Washington-Michigan game? Are you going to watch the Washington-Penn State game in November? Are you going to watch the Washington-Oregon game? Or are you going to watch other games that don't have the same historical perspectives and names and recognition? And that's a huge part of it. I think that when you also see the multimedia rights that are going to be coming down the pipe, you got to look to see how can we benefit? How can our players benefit? How can the programs benefit? And then, those conferences right now have that mentality. They have that mentality of we're going to try to do everything we can with 18 and 16, the 34 teams that are involved here to make it feel like, hey, this competitive nature of these two conferences is going to be pretty incredible. And it's what you want to be a part of if you're a player, and it's what you want to be a part of if you're a coach.
So, Jedd, I did a quick counting, and I went to Syracuse, so math is not a strong point, but I have you at 16 different jobs before Washington. So, to take things out of the existential of the big picture of the sport and light things up a little bit, how much of a ninja is Amber Fish at moving right now? And I know Seattle's been a stop before, though, in the NFL side of it. Just I would imagine it's like pack and play. You just fold it up and go at this point.
I mean, are you counting like me lifeguarding in a town pool? 16 jobs? That sounds like a lot, but we won't get into the details here. We will not get into the weeds.
I got the New Jersey Red Dogs on there. Come on, you can't discount the Red Dogs.
All right, we're counting. We should only count when I got married, so it's only been, I think, 14. But
okay.
Amber Fish is she's elite. She's elite. She's an A+ in every category. She loves our players. I'll tell you, the hardest thing for Amber right now is not picking up and moving, because we always believe our culture comes with us, our kids come with us. Ashley and Kendall, my 14-year-old and my 12-year-old, the rules aren't going to change in our house just because we're in a new house. The life is not going to change. They're going to have mom and dad there. They're going to be around football. But what's so sad for Amber is her investment in the kids. And when it's feeling as if you're no longer going to see them as much. And I think it's a real problem with the NCAA that we can't, you can't talk to the kids that you had at your house every weekend. You can't see that, once you leave a job, if you, God forbid, say, I love you, or I hope the best for you, it becomes this question on tampering. And we got to get rid of that, because these kids have built these huge relationships with families. And where Amber's so excited about joining us, about being here in Seattle with our kids, she's also really sad that she's leaving some of the players that we were so tight with.
Well, I want to delve into your path here, because I think it's pretty fascinating, but I feel compelled to ask about that. What was it like for you leaving when you communicated however that went with your Arizona players? What is that like? And you say the NCAA has to get rid of it. How? What's the best method? What are best practices for this? Which some of the players you have at Washington feel the same way about Kalen DeBoer leaving immediately in the aftermath of playing for the national championship.
Oh, there's no question they feel that way. And I understand it. I understand why they feel that way. And, it's an extremely hard day. We make a decision, and the decision that we made, we felt, we brought 21 members of our staff with us, and we felt like we were able to reward every member of our staff with this opportunity, financially, be able to take care of their families differently, and obviously some of the football that we could provide them for. But, you're not allowed to really, I was given 5 minutes to talk to the team, and, you go in there and you can't talk about if you want to join. You can't talk about anything about the future. You can only talk about that moment in time. You can only say, I love you, I appreciate you. And they're 18 to 22. And then you have to walk out the door. I went out the back door, went downstairs, and left. And then I have to send a text anytime I got a player that called me and said, the NCAA does not allow me to contact you unless you're in the portal. I appreciate the text. And yeah, you can get texts this long of, Coach, how appreciative I am of you, or how did this happen? And you can't really share anything. I don't know the right solution, but I know that these are 18 to 22-year-old kids that you build this relationship with. And then when you make a decision, you've got to not everybody needs to be thinking that every time you contact someone, it's for bad intentions. Sometimes it's just because you appreciate them and love them and want the best for them. But, we got to play by the rules right now, and the rules say no communication, so it's no communication.
What was your reaction to some of the acrimonious fallout, not necessarily with the players, but with the administration, the removal of the athletic director at Arizona? What was your reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's disappointing in so many ways, because I think Arizona was such a special place and is such a special place. And Dave Hickey was an amazing athletic director for me. And the 3 years that I was worked with Dave hand in hand, our partnership was fantastic. He treated our program incredibly well. And it was unfortunate that about a week later, he's no longer there. But what Dave did for Arizona football, I mean, let's not forget, we got there, we were on a 12-game losing streak, and we left there on a 7-game winning streak. And we were 130th probably in power rankings in 2021. And we were probably, we finished 11th in the country in 2023. Now the team's not the same. Moving forward, obviously Jacob Cowling and Tanner McLaughlin and Mike Wiley, those guys made huge impacts. Jordan Morgan's an elite player. Martell Irby, we were going to have our work cut out for us. You start naming all the guys that aren't going to be there, but it was certainly a incredible opportunity to work with Dave, and Dave did an amazing job.
Well, Jedd, let's dive into this path a little bit, and I'm going to start in New Jersey. So, do you identify with Springsteen or Bon Jovi?
Bon Jovi.
Okay.
Living on a prayer, man.
All right. We're going to hear that in Husky Stadium. Are you going to start changing the set list there?
We'll see. I gotta get to the bottom with some of this stuff. I gotta learn our players first before I learn our set list, though.
That's fair.
Now, you grew up playing tennis. You were a standout tennis player, and you decided to go to Florida. How many consecutive days did you actually leave handwritten notes on Steve Spurrier's windshields?
Yeah.
How many consecutive days?
I don't know. I think it's like 436 or something like that. It was over a year. And they weren't all handwritten notes. It was a way to contact him in a million different ways. And it was a letter, a note, a postcard, a book, a manual. You think about it. It was any way possible to try to get his attention, to have an opportunity to go work for him. If somebody tried that in 2024, they'd be arrested, on the 428 days earlier. But, we finally got, and I don't even know how I got in there. It was like, I tried to be an equipment manager. I tried to be there were no real student. I tried to be a student manager. I tried to be a recruiting assistant, and the programs were so small back then. I mean, you had one offensive GA, one defensive GA. I mean, Sammy McCorkle, the head coach at Dartmouth, was the defensive GA. Noah Brindise was the offensive GA. And that was it. Buddy Tebens was the one that finally allowed me in. And that's why I had BT on my visor all year after he passed, because when it was all said and done, Buddy was the guy that him and Dwayne Dixon were the two guys that finally said, yeah, if you come in at like the 9 o'clock hour, Coach Spurrier won't be around and you can start doing work. And then as I started, all right, you did a good job. I could come in at 8, then you come in at 7. And then finally they allowed me to work through this process. But I went to Florida for one reason. I went to Florida to coach football. And my dad said to me, what do you want to do for a living? And once we kind of got over the fact that I told him I was going to be a football coach, his answer was, well, you might as well go to a place that has the best football coach in the country. And that was Florida.
Howie Roseman is part of your Florida story. Now, if I understand, and I think I've asked you this somewhere over the years, Jedd, you guys weren't like 4-year roommates, but you like intersected for a summer. Is that my memory right there?
Yeah, we lived together for a year, for a fall, summer, spring. In the sophomore, my second part of my freshman year, first part of my sophomore year, his second part of his sophomore year, first part of his junior year. And we were in the same apartment complex. We lived next door to each other though for another year or two after that, in the same apartment. He and I are very close. We didn't know each other prior to moving in together. But we were fraternity brothers. So what happened was I joined the fraternity that he was at. He's 1 year older than I am. And then he was looking for a roommate because his roommate went abroad. And so we moved in there. And then obviously have become extremely close since and have remained a great friend, great ally. And he was one of the two people that I called when I had about 2 hours to make this decision to come here or not. He was one of the two that was involved in this decision.
Didn't you do something with Spurrier's ball plays too? Did you laminate them or put them into a computer? Do I recall that story?
How did I start? I was the first person to make the playbook on the computer. So all of his playbook was handwritten. And my goal was how do you make an impact back in the day when, you don't really, he doesn't know you. So what Coach Stevens and I did, and we bought this program called Playmaker Pro for $95. And we drew the playbook, or I drew the playbook, and we gave it to him. And he kind of like, yeah, that looks nice. Okay. And looked at it, and I don't know if it went any further than that, but we started using the playbook, and we gave all the players the pass game playbook, which was typed up for the first time on the computer. And then I was the first person to ever type his script. So he would walk out of the practice for the first time when we did blitzes. Was the only time he scripted practice, and that was the only thing that we gave him. So that was kind of my impact that I made for Coach Spurrier, but the impact he made for me was a lot greater.
Your head coaching style obviously becomes a medley of people you've worked for. And I'm just going to spit off the top of my head from Bill Belichick to Sean McVay to Jim Harbaugh to Jim Mora. And there's many more, NFL, Gus Bradley, I think. Like, there's plenty I'm missing too. Just how do you blend with those 14 stops? How do you blend all of that together, Jedd? And how did you sort of see that manifest itself at Arizona?
Yeah, I really would say that it started with my time with Coach Spurrier, and I never didn't call plays. So the first thing I was going to do, no matter if I was the head coach, I was going to run the offense because I just believed in that. Coach Spurrier did it, and then I had a chance to be with Coach Billick and Coach Shanahan, and the idea of that's kind of what I loved. So when I was in Arizona, when I was obviously 10 years as an offensive coordinator before that, I wasn't going to give up calling plays. I'll call the plays here at Washington the same way as we did at Arizona. When it comes down to how we do it, I think our offense is very similar to what Coach McVay does in LA. And then also probably we both learned from Coach Shanahan. Him at Washington, me at Denver, but it was still, Mike's offense. And then when it comes to kind of how we run our program, on the practice field is probably very similar to Coach Belichick. That's why I think I was able to get Steve to come here as our defensive coordinator, because we are going to have tough practices, physical practices. We are going to talk about fundamentals and basic football as much as possible and try to develop guys from the draft, or in our case, from signing day, not from free agency or not from the transfer portal. So really, we spend a lot of time with the basics, a lot of time with the young guys, and really try to teach blocking and tackling. So that's kind of, I think, the gamut of guys that I work for. And then hiring Coach Carroll's son, Brennan. Brennan and I have coached together now for 7 years, 6 years, 2 years at University of Miami, then 3 years at Arizona, and now here. And Brennan's my most trusted guy, and he's our offensive line coach, offensive coordinator. And he brings that energy that Pete brought. And he reminds me to have fun and how great this is, and keeps it upbeat and alive, and really his connection with the kids is amazing. So I think altogether we've just put together a staff at Washington that I'm really proud of.
Well, Rece is the one who tells me to have fun, by the way. I don't know how to do that.
It's really an interesting thing because those talks, you've got football royalty on your staff. What were those conversations like? I'm thinking particularly with Steve Belichick, who's had success as a defensive coordinator in the NFL. Yet, this is an opportunity in some ways for him to sort of branch out on his own. And while, his dad's a legend, the greatest NFL coach of all time, perhaps, and, general manager too, Yet this is an opportunity for Steve to make his own mark in some ways, I would think. Was that attractive to him?
Yeah, it was, it was one of those weird deals that, there was always this question like, what are you going to do with your defensive coordinator? And, in my mind, when the season ended, our defensive coordinator went to Texas when we were at Arizona. And I didn't make a move yet because I really wanted to see what the NFL landscape was going to look like. And if you look at Jesse Minter at Michigan, Mike McDonald at Michigan before that, when you look at Danton Lynn at UCLA, when you look at Al Golden at Notre Dame, these defensive coordinators are really in the top 8 when you look at in total defense, and they all came from the NFL. And I'm like, that's what I want to do this next go around. I didn't think it was going to happen in Washington. I thought it was going to happen in Arizona. And then when Washington happened, I think Steve was finishing up in Atlanta, not sure if his dad was going to get the job or not with the Falcons. And I reached out to him, and we're good friends, and we were together in New England in 2020. And I said, give this a chance. Come out here. Come check us out. This is an opportunity for you to run it yourself and really put your stamp. You've called it for 4 years. Now you get to put your stamp on it. And I had him out here. And then him and Brennan went out for lunch. And they talked, just the two of them, of the very small fraternity that they're in, right? 2 iconic head coaches' sons that are both in coaching. And what caused Brennan to leave Seattle to come to Arizona 4 years ago when he was working for his dad, and now the opportunity for Steve to be with us. And it happened to be that they're both on the same staff. They're both the coordinators, which is great, but it certainly is royalty. We don't take it lightly. I'm very much looking forward to all the visits from both the head coaches. The good news for me is they're both defensive coaches, so they'll be over there. But they're amazing, and I want them to be a part of this program. And my hope is that both Pete and Bill are here in Seattle a lot, and that they're very much involved in Husky football.
Let me ask you an inside football question here, because you brought up a really interesting point about Al Golden, the 2 Michigan DCs, the success NFL guys have had coming down recently. Now, they'll have really good players, right? They didn't go to UTEP and lead the nation in defense. But why do you think the NFL defensive schemes in the last couple of years have been so successful, Jedd?
Yeah, and I think what Danton Lynn did at UCLA and the jump that they made was really significant. I think it is good players. It's always going to be good players, though, right? Like, no matter what happens, if you don't have good players, none of it matters. It's a player-run everything. But I would say that there are some intricacies in scheme that attacking protections is something that you live and die through in the NFL. And you've spent hours upon hours upon hours for years not recruiting and just watching tape. And now you have this opportunity to just pop yourself into a college program. And yes, you probably haven't had the experience recruiting as you used to have, but you've just lodged so many hours of film study and understanding what you're going to get on offense and how to attack it, that I think there's a big advantage. And then the recruiting advantage comes from not, your relationships with street agents or with Twitter or with Instagram. Your recruiting advantage comes from, I just got done coaching the best in the world. Here's what Devin McCourty said about me. Here's what he thinks about the way I coach safeties. Here's what he thinks the way we prepared our team. Now, how would you not want to play here? So I think it's just a different way to recruit, but in the same regard, I think schematically there's just a great advantage.
What would you say along those lines is the difference in what an NFL player can handle from a scheme standpoint, from a game plan changing week to week standpoint, as opposed to what a college player? I mean, I know there's going to be a range in the college players, older guys who might have higher football IQs or whatever. Generally speaking, what's the difference in what a pro player can handle and what a college player can handle?
Yeah, well, I would say we run an NFL offense here. We don't shy away from the verbiage. If Sean walked on our practice field, he'd be able to call 75% of the plays, and the guys would be able to execute them with his exact verbiage that we used in LA. So I would say that we undervalue what they know or what they can learn. The more you give them, the more they learn. the less you give them, the more we say they can't learn. So our philosophy is we coach them in the same regard if we were going to take on a job in the NFL this year or next year. And that's our mentality. And we're going to try to, we understand there's some limitations based on signaling, but nowadays I think next year we're going to be able to have coach to quarterback communicator.
That'd make my job a lot easier, by the way, because I'm really sick of writing about sign stealing. So let Tony Petitti know there's an advocate.
If it doesn't happen, there's a chap named Stallions who's looking for. No, I'm kidding.
So I think you got to do it. I just believe in the more you can get these guys ready for the league. That's our responsibility. That's our job. That's what I want to do. I want to get them ready for life after football. And if you're going to come to Washington, your expectation is life after football is going to be in the NFL. We got 12 guys invited to the combine this year. And when I say we, I mean Washington. I wasn't here for that. At Arizona, we have, I think, 4 guys that are invited to the combine this year that they haven't had invited in 5 years. So you've got to try to be able to develop them, and you got to try to be able to put yourself in a position to make sure that you can find a way to, help them in every way possible to be successful.
Let me ask you this, Jedd. You mentioned 12 guys going to combine. That's an outlandish number for any program. I would think the biggest bold-faced name on your roster is Will Rogers, who wasn't there before. You probably haven't had a ton of time to study what he did at Mississippi State in 2021 or whatever in going forward here. But and again, you've probably seen him run around in workouts in shorts. So I certainly think there's probably limited purview. But just what of you know of him and have seen of him do you think he can be, and how do you think he can thrive in what you run?
Well, I saw him live twice because we played him. And remember, we played Mississippi State, both in Tucson in 22 and then in Starkville in 23. So I was able to see him live. I know what his skills are. They beat us both times, one in overtime. It was 24 all, and they beat it. And they kind of was in a quarterback rotation like this past season. The year before, they handled it pretty well. And, in Coach Leach's system, anyone that's thrown the ball 1,900 times in the SEC and 12,000 yards in the SEC has certainly the ability to lead any team in the country. It's our job now, Jimmy Doherty's our quarterback coach, and myself, to get him more comfortable playing in a pro-type system and more comfortable being under center and using the play-action game to his advantage, more comfortable utilizing all the different tempos and not just kind of living in one tempo, more comfortable using verbiage that he has never used before. So he seems to be a football junkie. I see him up here constantly watching tape. He's watching a lot of Arizona film right now. And he's the type of kid that just wants to learn and wants to get better. He takes a 6 a.m. lift group every morning because he wants to be the first guy here. So all those things are really great benefits to us having him for this year.
What constitutes success in your first year at Washington?
It's so interesting. They have 2 returning starters out of 22 players, and which is wild to say the least. And a lot of guys that are coming here with an expectation to start. That are transferring in. A lot of young guys that were here couldn't wait for their opportunity, and now they have it. So their mind is they're going to start. So I think competition is going to be incredible here in the spring and in the fall to try to get on the field. We better compete our tails off in every game. And the 60 minutes of play every single week, we better be a type of team that nobody wants to play. We better play our as hard as we possibly can play every snap. And then how the final score comes out, I don't know. I don't know anybody on our team right now. So I would expect us to be competitive. I would expect us to try to be one of the top teams in the country. I would expect us to try to be a part of every conversation that you guys have on Saturday mornings. But I know that we got a lot of work to do right now. When you have 20 new starters and you have 5 new offensive linemen, you have a new quarterback, you have a new running back. I don't know. You have 21 new staff members. I do feel good about what the process will look like and what the outcomes will look like for sustained success. I think this year we'll see how good we can get.
Let me wrap with this, unless Rece wants to pass on some tips on catching salmon, which he attempted to do on the game day set.
Attempted. I've been targeted twice, 2 receptions. Okay.
What do you think about the turnover salmon? Like if we get it rather than the turnover sword that we had, we're thinking about flipping a salmon into the student section. Do you think that's a good idea or a bad idea?
I think you'll get some calls from PETA, which game day I've heard has gotten in the past.
I think it's a fabulous idea. I'm not sure how it'll smell by the fourth quarter, but I think it's a great idea.
The Washington students probably weren't smelling a lot. At least the day I was there for the Oregon game, they seemed to be above a lot of sensories. So
this is true.
Go ahead, Steve. What was your last question?
So this is my last question. Washington, 2 starters back. I believe Michigan loses 17 starters. I believe Alabama lost a bunch, right? The post-spring portal, in my estimation, is going to be as active as ever because those 3 programs obviously are fresh off some high-end success, and they're all very motivated as athletic departments and staffs to continue that success. What do you think this post-spring portal will be like for trying to fill in some of the holes at your place and other places?
I think it'll be very, very busy. If you think about it, there was 129 teams that were able to poach 4. When you look at, I guess, San Jose State, Boston College, Arizona, Michigan, Washington, I guess those are the ones, right, in Alabama, so poach 6. Now you've got 130 teams or so, and really 60 teams or 40 teams, whatever they might be, that, there's going to be a lot of good players in that portal, really good players in that portal that are going to want to come play for places like Washington and Michigan and Alabama. And we would expect some great players to want to join us. They certainly can see opportunity there. And if they see opportunity and be able to help bring us back to the championship level, we got a 12-team CFP coming up. And I think all of that's going to play to the advantage of some of our programs.
I know that we promised a half an hour, but given the fact that I wouldn't be able to live with myself if we didn't broach this subject, and the fact that this is probably a characteristic that's going to make you a formidable recruiter, both at the high school level and within the portal. Tell me about your relentless pursuit of getting into the OJ trial.
I mean, have you been talking to Rick Neuheisel? Because this is a Neuheisel question. I've never been on his show that the OJ trial hasn't come into play.
It's a fascinating thing, though, Jedd. How did you become so fascinated? We're all fascinated to some degree, but not many of us went out there and said, I'm going to the trial.
I'll give you the Cliff Note version of it, okay?
Okay.
So
all right.
I was in college. I was a sophomore in college. I was a freshman in college. And the chase happened at a graduation party my senior year in high school. I then go to the trial. And my goal, if I was I said this to Robert Shapiro a couple of years ago. He and I went out for lunch. And I said, I was either going to be you or Steve Spurrier. I did choose Steve Spurrier, but if you want to choose to pick up the bill for lunch today, that would be perfect. But that was kind of in my mind what it was going to be. And so as my dad was a lawyer, my brother was a lawyer. So I go to the trial. I just said to my dad in the summertime, I go, Dad, I got to get out to this trial. I'm watching it every day. I can't get enough of this thing, of the criminal defense attorney side of this whole deal. I'm like, if I'm going to do it, that's who I'm going to be. I'm going to be Bob Shapiro. And I wound up going out there by myself. My high school best friend's sister was living out there. She let me crash at her place. I showed up to the courtroom at 4 a.m. the next day, suit and tie on, and nothing. They wouldn't let me in. It was, they let 7 people in. Tried to sneak my way in, met a bunch of family members. Nothing happened. Next day, tried it again, nothing. And then I finally, that next Monday morning, I had a suit and tie on, and I see a car pull up, and it's like a Lexus and a Rolls Royce and another fancy car. And it was like Shapiro and Johnny Cochran and F. Lee Bailey. And I'm in a suit and tie and they're in a suit and tie. And I'm like, screw it. So they walk in and I just kind of joined. I joined the walk and the elevator door closed And it was like Kardashian, Cochran, Shapiro, Fish, Barry Sheck. And they said, "Who are you?" And I'm like, Jedd Fisch, criminology major at University of Florida. And they said, "Just come on in with us." So I wound up sitting in the front row of some sock evidence deal. It's crazy.
I hear coaches all the time talk about being relentless. It's one of their favorite words. Between the notes on Spurrier's windshield and getting into the OJ trial, and you said it was just evidence, so you didn't see the whole glove thing, right? It wasn't
I wasn't there for the glove. I only had one day there. I had to get back to my lifeguarding job that Pete wanted to reference in the early conversation.
Well, recruits don't have a chance with you because you're going to get them one way or another eventually. So, Jedd, what a pleasure. Thanks for spending time with us. Wish you all the luck in the world at Washington. And maybe once you find a place, you might be riding a boat to work. A lot of your predecessors have done that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Jedd.
Man, that was great. I wish every coach ran around and tried to get in the OJ trial and stuff. A lot of fun things to talk about. Look forward to seeing Jedd's team play. And it's just over 200 or so days away until we get back at it. Pete, you've been hard at work. Jedd touched on this a little bit in our conversation with him about this notion of an AFC, NFC type venture in college football. And
he was pretty blunt.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I think at this point you might as well be. I mean, with the Big Ten and the SEC now collaborating, I think you had a pretty funny line in your piece that it might be an alliance, but please do not call it the alliance with capital letters on each side. After it was, what did you say? Rightly mocked, which was yes. True. It was like
I called it the Seinfeld alliance when it happened. It was the alliance about nothing.
Yeah. It reminded me, I don't know why it reminded me of some bad superheroes, like a Super Friends episode, but I digress from that. This, however, probably is actual power players. And instead of forming some fake alliance, what they're doing is okay, how do we not only get control of this, but how do we maximize this from an economic standpoint, from a competitive standpoint? What are you making of this unity between the Big Ten and the SEC and Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti?
I think it smacks of wanting to control your own destiny, Rece, right? Like they've seen transformation committees on this, committees on that, talks on this. You hear about venture capital coming in. We wrote a story 2 weeks ago where the vultures are circling a little bit. They see the inefficiencies in college sports. And I think Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti, who are very close over Petitti's 11 months since getting hired at the Big Ten, maybe 10. And they've said, let's control our own destiny. Let's not have South Alabama dictate what Alabama does. Let's not have Eastern Michigan dictate what Michigan does. Let's pull together and push forward here, because the answer still likely lies, Rece, for those leagues within the conference setup still. If you go back and I read, I didn't read all 55 pages of it, but I read the Supreme Court opinion from 2 years ago from the Alston case. And the word conferences comes up in multiple places. And the conferences is subject to as many restrictions as the NCAA is. So I think using that as a little bit of cover, they're going to link forward and go ahead. And the path is through settlement and revenue share. So when this happened, they did all the jargon gumbo, right? Of clear-eyed strategy, da-da-da-da. But the reality, when I made calls for a couple of days here, was that House versus the NCAA case, which is a swimmer from Arizona State with billions on the line, is sort of ripe to be settled this spring if it's going to be settled. All 5 power conferences are defendants. I don't know where the Pac-12 stands on that if it disappears. But so if they can push forward and get the money to settle through a court order, they could also potentially, and this is all hypothetical still, and there's a lot of legal hoops, they could potentially set up and say, this is what revenue share looks like going forward. We're going to pay you for past NIL damages, but now we're going to give athletes, and I'm making this up, 22%, 12%, whatever it is, you are going to get a cut of the television revenue. You are going to be brought in. And then they go to Congress and they say, okay, we've done our part to link everything in likely appease some people. We don't want you to save us, but can you help us with an exemption for antitrust? So that is a possible path forward. Am I sitting here and saying it's going to happen? I don't know, Rece. Like probably not, right? Because there's hundreds of paths being theorized. But I do think it's noteworthy that those two leagues appear motivated to attempt to make this a path.
A couple of things come to mind. One was people listen to this podcast for us to talk about football and offensive line experience, which didn't necessarily work out that well last year, at least in parts. But these things are important. And the case that you mentioned, the House case, I was with an athletic director the night that that became class action. And he's like, dude, this could be billions. This is huge. So this is worth paying attention to for the rank and file fans, because this is going to have, I'm not saying you have to delve into all the briefs, but this is worth paying attention to because it might impact your favorite sport and how it is structured and how it's organized and who's in charge and really how healthy the future of it will be. This case will have a lot to do with it. The other thing you brought up was this idea of private equity, which has most notably been surrounding Florida State and perhaps some others that I'm not aware of. But it was brought up in a conversation I was having last week that he said, that all sounds well and good because people say, hey, they've got a lot of money. Let's get the private equity people in here and we'll have money and private equity. That's the answer. The problem becomes is at some point, the private equity people want to make money. And if they don't make money or don't make it as quickly or aren't repaid as quickly as they would like to be, then they're going to say, hey, guess what? We're in control of how you spend your money. And you're not, or more precisely, the money that we loaned you, or the money that we invested with you. And so now you're going to make this move and cut this program and that program and not pay this guy that. We're going to make this move here. And now you're not running your own program. That is probably a somewhat oversimplification, and it might even be somewhat hyperbolic, but I don't really think so. Because when people start pouring money into things, they want some control. And it's also one of the issues that will eventually come up with these collectives. I'm not saying they're bad, they're great, but at some point, if people are pouring their money into something, they want some say into how things are structured. So, all these things are fascinating, not nearly as interesting or entertaining necessarily as what happens on the field and what players are going where and all the things that we do that we love. But these are factors that are going to impact things over the next few years as we sort out the playoff television contract and the format and all of that. What impact do you think the Big Ten SEC strength and unity, I guess, working together will
you can't call it a union because then there's like potential actual unions.
Yeah, right.
In the Dartmouth case. So I called it like an arm linking. I was like going to the source because when you get alliance out of the way from a word perspective, there's not a lot of other linking words that can be used.
Well, okay, I want to get back quickly because we don't want to dwell on this, but I do want to get back quickly to the Dartmouth players unionizing. But 12-team format, 5 and 7 seems to be where they will eventually will land. But will that be good enough for the superpowers, for the Big Ten and the SEC?
Well, I think we'll end up there for the next 2 years. And I think it was not a coincidence that this alliance, right? This Big Ten SEC advisory cooperation was announced on a Friday, and everybody flew to Dallas on Sunday and Monday for CFP meetings. Because I think there is some stuff in the CFP, including the Pac-2 sort of going on a little power surge, including the payment of SMU, where these Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti were like, enough of this nonsense. All right. Like this is, and again, I'm not quoting them. I want to be clear about that. But like, to me, the actions dictate, like, we are going to control the destiny here. We are not going to let some of these smaller mouths and smaller budgets and smaller brands determine the future and the outcome. So, and Heather Dinnish did a good story on this over the weekend, Rece. Like, I think CFP governance is a huge issue right now. Like, going forward, I'd be skeptical once we go into the next iteration of this thing, the next contract thing, if you have to be unanimous and the Sun Belt has the same vote as the SEC or the MAC and the Big Ten, whatever, right? Like, I feel like the governance model is going to shift to be weighted proportionally. And then, some people would theorize that it's better for the SEC if you don't have any automatic bids. If you just say, hey, best 12, come on in. If Boise's number 11 one year, great. If you're not, great. And there's been some notion that do they want more automatic bids? And I think all they want is more bids. And so they have to sit back and figure out, do we try to get X amount of automatic bids, or do we push forward with that? And then the other big looming issue here, and we've talked about this a bunch on the pod, and we've sort of gently mocked it, is conference championship games. They are going to become obsolete with a playoff, or somewhat irrelevant with a playoff. Now, some years they will be, some years they won't be, but they are not going to carry the same juice. You're going to have coaches who don't play their starters in them. Those are real issues that are going to come up. And can they address that ahead of time, or do we have to have it? Do they have to fall on their face and learn their lesson that way? So anyway, that's a little bit scrambled here, but I think these are the types of issues that those two leagues are going to be aligned on because they're sitting in similar chairs.
The Dartmouth basketball players who got the right to join the union. Now, look, my son was an Ivy League athlete. It's a wonderful experience, but there's not, there aren't athletic scholarships. In fact, there are no, at least at Princeton, I know there are no merit scholarships of any kind.
Wow.
There are no scholarships. Now, what the secret is, and I'm overly simplifying this too, the secret is if you can get into school, they make it not financially prohibitive based on your economic situation. For any student, that's not just athletes. So it's a wonderful experience, but I wouldn't say it is a huge revenue driver.
Sure.
So in your judgment, from what you've ascertained from this, are the Dartmouth basketball players just seeking to be trailblazers and pioneers, or is there something else afoot that they have been limited in some way that they feel is unfair?
Yeah, well, if there is a non-revenue sport, it's Dartmouth basketball, right? Has Dartmouth ever made the NCAA tournament? I don't think they've made it. They haven't made it in my lifetime.
I don't recall. I'm sure I would imagine they have, maybe back in the 30s or they started in 39, 30s or 40s. Maybe they made it a year, but I don't know that.
But they're not looking for a piece of the pie here. And if you saw the statement that the players made, they were, oh, wow, look at us, Rece. They made the Final Four in 1942 and 44. They were the runner-up in both those years. So, yes, they have 7 NCAA tournament appearances, none since 59. So, to all the big green and the tall green that generations past that feel slighted, I want to make sure you get your you get your due. But the quote from the players, and I'm just saying this generally, I'm not actually reading it, is I'm paraphrasing, that's the word I was looking for, was basically we look forward to see the chaos we've created. Now that's I'm juicing that up a little bit, but we look forward to see how this impacts college sports. And so that to me was a window into what their motives were. Now I see the same way I see the House case, the same way I see other, these are, the smoke that used to be on the horizon is now right in front of the camp here for college sports. And so this is another motivator to find a solution for leaders. And I think even in the Big Ten SEC advisory thing, pending lawsuits is one of the things that's noted amid the jargon gumbo. And I do feel like there are legal situations. Those leagues are sick of random judges telling them how they should run their, $1 billion industry. And I don't blame them, right? We need some leadership if we're not getting it from Indianapolis. And Charlie Baker has tried, although that went over pretty flat with those two leagues. His D1 sort of hypothetical that he threw out at the NCAA convention. So I just think that I look at that as that will be appealed and it will take years before it actually happens. So I don't think everyone's going to be a union tomorrow. You're going to see unions at the NCAA tournament this year in March. But I think that could potentially happen, and that's going to motivate people around college athletics to control their own destiny and find solutions to avoid that from happening. Because remember the Northwestern thing, if I have this right, and I reread it, in some of this Dartmouth stuff, it passed regionally, then it got rejected, and it just kind of fizzled. It kind of fizzled out.
I've said that I thought collective bargaining was the only path forward, which almost by definition means unionizing. Certainly not against that. But I guess as I thought about Dartmouth's role in this, I couldn't help but think of one of the great philosophers of our time, and the words that he had. Speaking of young men in this situation, he's been misunderstood. It's a comfort to know his intentions are good. And he sits in a room with a lock on the door with his maps and his medals laid out on the floor. And he likes to be known as the angry young man. And there's always a place for the angry young man with his fist in the air and his head in the sand. He's never been able to learn from mistakes, so he can't understand why his heart always breaks. But maybe this time, the angry young men will lead the way and lift us from the realm of ignorance into the realm of understanding, and get everybody their fair share of the vast revenue. That philosopher, by the way, was none other than William Joel.
I even caught that pop culture reference. I was a little disappointed Jedd was a Bon Jovi guy. I'm a big Springsteen guy. So I was a little bummed. Yeah, I've seen Springsteen like 30 times. Yeah. Like every other white male sports writer in his 40s, I'm sort of like have to like enjoy Bruce Springsteen.
I really enjoy Bruce Springsteen, and this is going to be blasphemous, I know, to some. I don't quite, and I really enjoy his music. I don't quite understand the
cult,
the cult, the near reverence for it. He's a brilliant performer. I mean, nobody questions that. I have a good friend that is well known in the sports industry, Nick Kahn. Nick Kahn and I often sort of exaggerate and mock Tom Rinaldi, who is near Springsteen cultish, and we exaggerate and make fun, and that I think
good to know about Tom. Tom and I could go in a dark room and have long conversations.
Yeah, I think Springsteen's great. I really enjoy his music. I don't understand the near cultish devotion to it, though.
Totally fair. My wife, I listen to E Street Radio on Sirius quite a bit in the car. My wife calls it old man radio. So that's what do we have to listen to old man radio again? It's like
what does Kate prefer?
She loves Stevie Nicks.
I saw her in concert once.
I have not seen her. Kate's seen her a bunch of times. That is her favorite. We've really covered some ground today between salmon tossing, the OJ trial, a little bit of music, a little bit of antitrust.
Head ball coach getting notes off his windshield. 400. I'm still fascinated by that. 436 consecutive days that he made some attempt to contact Steve Spurrier.
So Rece, before we depart here, I think we just need to get to the crux of what the state of North Carolina wants to know. Why are you jinxing the Tar Heels?
I don't know.
Stop.
It's really it's become a thing online. It's a preposterous thing, and it's amusing. It's not.
Do you know your record? What's your record?
I don't know. I was trying to think of it earlier. I can recall the losses. I'm having trouble coming up with the wins, but I think that's
a problem.
I remember a win when they beat Joe Girard when he was at Syracuse. He had a nice night, not quite as nice as last night, but he had a good one. But there was the only Carolina Duke game I ever called was in the Smith Center, and Duke smacked them. That was Coach K's last year. Then of course there were two later.
They could forgive you for that. I don't think a lot of people think of that game that year.
I called a game where Jaquan Newton threw in like a 45-footer or something on Carolina's senior night and beat them for Miami. Called a thrashing at Miami a couple of years ago. The Georgia Tech game last week, Clemson game last night. There was a random, my friend Lauren Ritter George, who as fine a production assistant as we've ever had on GameDay Basketball, and for the last, 8-10 years, a Carolina grad, has worked at Carolina, reminded me last night afterwards, teasingly, she's joking, she's not one of the people who actually think it's a real thing, that she said, oh, and don't forget Marquette. You also called a middle of the season Marquette game that we lost. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'd forgotten Marquette. So I don't really know. I'm sure there were some good wins, but
hey, Rece, what game do you have Tuesday?
I've got North Carolina at Syracuse. A couple of I'll leave you with this. I go back to the hotel in Chapel Hill last night. Felt like Bill Raftery. I said, sit down and get a bowl of soup, kid. So I sit down. I order the gumbo, and these two Carolina guys, older gentlemen, prominent apparently in Carolina booster circles, they came up and they sat down beside me. They were very pleasant, and they said, "We like you a lot, Rece, and we really hope that you don't call any more of our games this year." And I said, well, buckle up Tuesday night in Syracuse, Pally. I don't know. It's one of those things. But hey, you know what? Kidding aside, I know we do mostly football here. That was a really good performance by Clemson last night.
Yes.
And
yes. They were kind of, because they were in the top 10 early in the year, and all of a sudden they were teetering a little bit. And I feel like that's the sort of, we're going to be a top 6 seed in this upcoming NCAA tournament type win.
Yeah, agreed, because they've got a stretch coming here. I was talking to Brownell about it now. They're going to be they're not going to win all of them because it's college basketball and it's hard to win a bunch of games in a row. But I think it's like the next 8 games or something like that, they're going to be by, Ken Pom and BPI and stuff like that. They're going to be pretty significant favorites in their next 8 games. So they've got a chance to fatten up that record. They've really had a good year. They had a bad 3-game stretch in which the first Carolina game was in the middle of. They did not play well. They got beat down pretty good 3 straight times. Then their other 3 losses in conference play probably could have played better in the double overtime loss to Georgia Tech. But the other 2 are basically tough luck. The tough call at the end of the Duke game, the shot that didn't go in against Virginia, things happen. And so they had a little get back at Chapel Hill last night. So
that's a heck of a win for them.
That was a great win. Great win. Great win for them. Tough loss for the Heels, but the Heels will be just fine.
Yeah, I think the Heels
they'll be just fine. They'll be good. Yeah. As long as
they can survive their Rece Davis jinx.
As long
you don't call tournament games. So
I was going to say, as long as I'm not loaned out to CBS Turner to call NCAA tournament games, the Heels should be fine.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think
Have you been enjoying the hoops?
Yeah, it's been fun. It's
you've had some good games, man.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate that the game, even the Duke Louisville game, and Louisville's not very good and really struggling, but they played really hard and they stayed in the game, so that was good. But the last 2 have been just great. The Georgia Tech court storming, and then last night Clemson winning against Carolina, really entertaining games. And for Tar Heel fans listening that are probably a little sensitive this morning, not great because they lost. Obviously, broadcasters want close games. We just want close games and storylines, and that's what we want. So it's good.
If anyone thinks you're biased against North Carolina, there's hours of podcast material where you're reading poetry to Drake May.
Yeah, no, and I saw both on Saturday and Tuesday. I saw Luke, and I've got so many great Carolina fans. Got a chance to chat with him briefly. The Purple Bowl. Have you been to Chapel Hill in the Purple Bowl? It's an acai bowl place, and they've got coffee, and they've got these great little energy balls.
I love me some acai bowls.
Go in there.
Had one this morning.
Next time you go, it's the best I've ever had. Next time you go to Chapel Hill, go in, tell Paula I sent you, and she's phenomenal. What a
What's
great
it called?
place.
The Purple Bowl?
Purple Bowl. And I mean, everybody goes there. And you know what? The first time I ever went, I went with my friend Freddie Kiger, who's a North Carolina historian. He's worked stats at Carolina, forever. And to show that the man has good taste, Freddie takes me there. We're enjoying a nice bowl. Here come Drake May and Sam Howell. They're regulars there. So there you go.
That's good.
So
one of my best friends from college, Mike Crowley, who's a loyal listener to our podcast, lives right outside Chapel Hill. So I'm gonna send him there for a review. Yep. He
should go there.
He can take his kids. Yeah. No, that seems like I'm a big bowl guy. Uber Eats and all that stuff when we're on the road now. Like I just get a bowl ordered from like a local bowl spot. So that's like a really good thing to know. Like when I go to a town what the good bowl spot is. Just a tremendous place. Great stop on the tour. That was fun, Pete. Thanks for getting Jedd Fish set up. We're going to have guests throughout the rest of the off season, talk plenty of other things, start turning our attention toward the draft as we get closer and closer to that coming up. Maybe we'll even get a few Senior Bowl stories that have been left in the back of the notebook someplace. But thanks for listening to the College Game Day Podcast. We encourage you to subscribe or download this podcast wherever you prefer to get your podcast. See you next time.